Hey everybody, welcome back to the Jeep Journals. This is Stingray and I'm coming to you on December 21st, 2021. This is the second day of my water fast and I've got to say, I already have clarity. The clarity that I have is pretty tremendous. The ability to focus is beyond compare. And the reason that I was able to experience this so quickly is because if you've been following my journey, you've noticed that I talk occasionally about fasting. Well, this is at least the third time actually, that I've gone without food in less than a calendar year's period for more than one day. For one day or more, I should say. Because on one particular experience, it was just for one day. But the level of focus to me is incomparable. It gets to the point where I start to observe things that are going wrong, and I want to come up to the source of the problem and just shake it just a little bit. To say, hey, we've got a solution right here in hand. We just need to put it into effect. For an example, if on numerous occasions I've explained that I am unavailable right now for visiting hours are over. Visiting hours have been over with me for some time. If I've explained that and asked politely for somebody to not show up unannounced, it becomes ironic to me, a little bit funny, don't you think? It's like the fact that I wrote a song that talked about people showing up uninvited during the holiday season. My favorite time of year is now, but before you ask me why. It's basically a holiday song that I shared in the past, and it's kind of funny because what it describes is the chaos of the holidays. And in the chaos of the holidays, oftentimes we can find ourselves not paying attention. So if someone asks politely, hey, please, that song brings up really bad memories, or whatever, I'm just making up a situation, but if someone asks politely to turn off a certain song or to change the station or something like that, there might be a reason for that. And it might be because there's an amount of discomfort that comes about from an experience in the past, which is interrupting our experience that's happening right now in this beautiful moment where you've been listening along going, what is the point of this? Why is this guy rambling? There's no rambling about this. This is one of the clearest messages that you're going to get at any point. And the insight that you're going to get, I'm not charging you for it. It's free. It's free with the exception that you've got to put in the time to hear this. Hear it, like really hear it. Not just a part of it. When you hear a part of it, you might not get, hey, do not show up today or any day right now until we agree upon it. Otherwise, I'm sending everything back to you that you keep sending my way. In fact, it's not a punishment. It's just an acknowledgement. It doesn't mean an insult for me to call attention so greatly that I have to take such measures to say, hey, you're not paying attention. You're not paying attention. I'm asking you to please pay attention. Please focus. The same way that I'm telling you not eating for 2 days has caused me focus. Now, the reason I was trying to say that since I've done this numerous times, it's had a different effect is because the first time that I did this, it took approximately 13 days to really have this level of focus. The second time, I was quite hungry for the first 3-4 days. By day 6, I was able to focus. Now, since I just did this last month, I went the entire week, 6 days worth of the Thanksgiving week, without eating any food. Since I just did this and resumed eating as normal, I noticed that this time around, as I'm experiencing my fast, by the second day itself, I've had a level of focus that helps me to say, look, this is comical. It's comical, but it's not comical, because when I ask someone to not show up, and they just show up almost defiantly or without being careful, without having any care for the thing that they're mistreating. When I asked that politely, I asked it to avoid a certain situation. And that situation is called miscommunication. To avoid miscommunication, sometimes we need to pull over, slow the car down and pull over, come to a complete stop, and look each other in the eye. And when we look each other in the eye, we can see what we're talking with if we care about what we're talking with. If we're scolding a pet or a child, we might not care so much for it at that moment because we take it for granted. I'm not taking any moment of my time for granted. In fact, I'm trying to make my time count as much as it can, especially during these limited time frame experiences that we have together. So, now that you've been listening for 6.5 minutes and you understand, hey, I kind of understand. We're not paying attention. Some mistakes are happening. This is causing some situation or another. Well, Ray, if this is happening every time we get together and talk about these things, why is that? It could be because one or more of us are not participating in the system in a way that takes the other person into consideration. So this is day 2 of my extended water fast, and I'm sharing with you a spiritual morsel of genius that's come from that period of fasting, so that you yourself don't necessarily have to go through the discomfort of fasting. Because whether you understand it or not, it can be quite uncomfortable to not eat food, especially when we've eaten food sometimes 2 or 3 times per day for years. When we do these types of things to our bodies, we condition them to a certain programming. And a lot of us don't like to acknowledge these words like programming and processed and any certain word that might trigger an emotional response. Because once you have an emotional response, what happens, class? That's right, you're not listening. When you have an emotional response to something, you are no longer listening in general. And I say that with care and consideration, not as an accusatory process, but to say, there was a mistake that happened today. Again, almost like it was the perfect example to showcase the miscommunications that we're having, even among our loved ones. When we love something, we nourish it, we nurture it, we pay attention to it. When we don't love something, we don't pay attention to it. It's as simple as that. So I'm not trying to accuse or diminish what anyone has in any responsible relationship that is occurring today in the world. What I'm trying to suggest is that there might be addictive tendencies that are causing us a little bit of miscommunication. And by a little bit of miscommunication, what I mean is we are unable to understand that in order for one person to go forward, the other person has to be able to move forward first. And sometimes sharing the highways is like that. I mean, I told you about when it was happening, there's people honking at people for not actually going when there's a big gap in front of them. There's a lot of miscommunication that's happening, and the communication that we have is like you just heard it. There's no one around me, so I'm going to do this. That's not a communication. That's more like what are the words that we would say in today's terms? If I say the words, that's more like an FU. If I say the actual words, some people will be shocked to the point of not being able to hear. Even though we've got this beautiful sun showing through all of the highway over my left shoulder. And we've got this beautiful day, beautiful blue skies, amazing infrastructure that's allowing me to get from point A to point B in my time machine in under 20 minutes so that I can experience a beautiful walk in nature. The life. A lot of people continue to assess what I'm talking about as criticisms, overbearing, parental, and harsh. When the truth is harsh. The truth can be harsh, especially if we have not been paying attention. If we haven't been paying attention, what do we do again? We're panicked. And we're panicked for why? God only knows why. I've got a website, us385.com, but I actually started a new website called moneyforahaircut.com. I strongly encourage that you visit my website, moneyforahaircut.com. Or if you prefer, I have a different rendition of my website for anyone who is enlightened and who would care to see it from yet another perspective. TheJeepJournals.com is also my domain. US 385 though. US 385 ends at its southernmost terminus at the Big Bend National Park. That's why us385.com is on so many of the things that I bring to show to you. In case you were wondering. So when you think about why you've been listening for 12 minutes, why we're talking about the errors that are happening, that are occurring, and why I'm talking about focus and fasting and eating right and health is wealth. At those points, when you understand that some of these conversation points, these topics about truly sustainable and true generational wealth, and the season of sharing is caring, and caring is paying attention to, at that level, when you understand that what I'm talking is not just a bunch of rambling, when you understand that what I'm talking is for really the safety of our own group, then at that level, you'll also begin to understand, I'm not doing this just for myself. This isn't a selfish thing. This whole conversation, this entire conversation, shouldn't be going in one ear and coming out the other unprocessed. Like there was nothing in between there, filtering it out. If we've got 3 participants in a conversation and somebody is flying off the handle, out of control, throwing a tantrum. Did you see that? I threw my words. If someone's throwing a tantrum, it's usually pretty important to consider getting that activity into some level of control. And by some level of control, what I mean is, if the tantrum goes unchecked, if someone's going to burst a blood vessel in their head or further damage an already weakened heart, they might want to be aware of it if they're concurrently trying to heal that damage, to keep that vessel from bursting, to keep that heart from dying. Health is wealth, my friends and family. So when I talk about these things, and when I talk about how wealthy I am in my life, and how much opportunity I have to enjoy everything that I'm enjoying around me, every day, it becomes a little bit challenging for the people who are not enjoying their own life. And a lot of us pretend that we enjoy our life. When I began fasting, I started to understand there are certain things I enjoy more than others. There are things that when you reduce your own energy level, you understand that you can dedicate that energy effectively towards. And you understand how to prioritize certain things that you have on your list of things that you want to entertain your life with. And I say entertain your life with because almost all food is also an entertainment. It's not just for basic nourishment. And what I mean by that is, think about the foods that we get nowadays. How many of us go out of our way to have plain, sustainable, quality food? And how many of us go out of our way to have luxury food? Meat every day, 3 times per day sometimes. How many of us? I know I did. My health reflected my level of wealth. My health showed. There's a mask in the parking spot that I'm about to back into. I'm sorry I'm leaning over so far. I've got a backup camera, and at the same time, this mobile device is kind of in the way. And the main reason I'm using the camera is because it is a lot more efficient with all of its sensors, and as long as I'm also double checking to make sure no one's there. These technologies that we've all come up with, they're amazing. They're efficient. These thoughts that we are able to share with one another, it's called communication. In order for anything to advance, including our ability to communicate, we need to recognize that there are levels of communication. And if I, again, today itself, 2 days without having any food so far, 1.5 really, but seriously, 2 days without having had any food, if I'm able to process the basic thought that it takes to read something from someone and also interpret what they're trying to tell me their feelings are as they're saying it, if I'm able to only hear that when I'm talking with the person face to face, but never have the conversation that says, hey, we're not having a conversation, someone's yelling. If we're not able to have this communication where we're able to establish that the levels of communication are not miles and miles apart. The levels of communication have to do with hearing first. Heart condition. How good is our heart? If our heart's not that good, might not be able to hear anything that's calling out for help. For over a month, during the month of November, for over that entire month, I had relatives keep me from knowing the contact information for one of my direct relatives, who, at the same time, incidentally, had signed away his property to those same relatives. They collected money from the sale of his property. If you look back on this channel, you'll see a lot of events. They're all tied to the same situation that I've been talking about, which some of us may think we're not in peril of having these things happen in our own family subset. And at the same time, as we do watch the news, especially those of us who are paying a lot of money to subscribe to those channels that bring that news, we're constantly being exposed to things that we're consuming about how certain situations are supposed to unravel, how acceptable it is to lock one another outside of our own homes, how acceptable it is to talk in a specific, demeaning way to those who we find less desirable in the society that we live in. In a lot of ways, all that we have to do to pay attention with one another is to be present with one another. And by present, what I mean is you have to let go of all opinions of everything and not be influenced by the overwhelming power of addiction and only entertaining one another in each other's presence with addictive tendencies like foods, drinks, and lack of pure conversation. All of these things, in their simplest forms, have to do with why I began fasting. I'm going without food because there are people who are suffering right now. I have suffered quite a bit in the past. Some of that was self-imposed. And at this point in time, at this junction in my life, I'm absolutely living it up. As you watch this page evolve, and as you watch, as I showcase all of the guitars and music that I have for you, I hope that you're compelled to enjoy this channel just as much as you take in terms of the quantity of destruction that we see on other channels. There needs to be a balance. Without balance, what do we have? Class, what do we have? That's right, panic. When we have imbalance, we panic. So it's very important to get things back into balance. If someone asks you a question, says specifically, hey, can you please don't play that song? I might advise, okay, I will not play this song. However, can I ask you why? Can you tell me what it is? Is it the tone? Because I like music and I would like to play another song. Maybe we can enjoy a song together. If we cannot enjoy a song together, if we cannot enjoy a conversation together, if we cannot enjoy and understand each other's words together, then we have a programmed values, watered down values set of communication. It's not even pure water. We have an over-processed set of criteria when it comes to hearing one another, is probably a better way it should be put, especially considering I'm talking about a water fast. This is my second day of a water fast. What day is it? That's right, it's December 21st, the day after my birthday. And what I'm doing is showcasing how to reverse the aging process. And the first step is being able to learn something with one another. And in order to learn something with one another, on occasion, it takes more than just a few moments of passing thought about something. You really need to deep dive into the topic. When we deep dive into the topic and look back over the past journey, the trip that I took, where I took 4 days to cover the West Coast, most of it. When we talk about what's possible in humanity with the tools that we have, with media in particular, where we're able to show these true stories about what can happen, what we're capable of, how we can achieve more, how we can heal one another. When we talk about these things, we're learning something positive. So as you're hearing this, it might tire your mind out in a way that the already constant negative influx does not cause our mind. Sometimes watching so much negative over the course of our life, we expect it. And we expect it because it's like programming. So what happens when we don't have that programming and we turn off programming for a while or change the channel to something else for a while? What happens? What happens if we've never been exposed to negative and then suddenly we're pushed into that capacity? For an example, this just happened last year. There was a point in time when I was traveling with a relative, two relatives actually, and one relative attempted to jump out of a moving vehicle and was punching my arm. And then they robbed a convenience store. And then they almost got hit by someone after running through a parking lot, and then they confronted that person. And I'm not ashamed to say, because this is a true story, and it's a detail that's worth considering, but this man, my relative, confronted a woman. And he was ready to fight her. She was ready to confront him. Somewhere in between all of what I'm saying, there's a spiritual underlying element where I'm telling you that the person who did not strike my dad with their car and who really could have struck my dad with their fists, that person was absolutely on the spiritual realm of being an angel, because they challenged what they knew shouldn't have been happening. And they did it in a way that was to safeguard not only themselves, but whoever would encounter this person in the future. This person singularly was able to take control of a situation that we had no control over, because they used their voice. Over the past few days, I sent out a few letters. I'm going to send out one more package today that's going to reference this. And again, this gesture that I'm taking, this action that I'm taking, where I suggested, if you decide to come over unannounced and unexpected, because we already asked that you not come over, if you do this, the resulting action is I'm going to send back all of what you sent me, because you're not even hearing me. If you're not hearing me, what does that mean? You're either panicking or something is completely amiss in our friendship, in our relationship, in our lives, where we cannot hear one another. We choose not to. And I do not at any point want to surround myself with anybody who would choose not to hear me, because that means I've been dismissed. So in the same manner, but with a little bit more explanation, in other words, I'm not ghosting anybody. During my second day of my water fast, I'm suggesting that somebody is not paying attention. And in order to call attention to this deficit, I had to take extreme actions, which aren't really that extreme, to where someone would go, oh, wow, I wasn't paying attention. Only at that point will we be able to have a full conversation. Only at that point. So this is my second day of clarity to come up with a little bit more insight into why someone might want to do a water fast. I've talked about this topic in different channels, and some people immediately talk about the weight loss aspects of it. A water fast can indeed result in weight loss. And I mean that in two different ways. If you talk about spelling the way that I talk about spelling, wait. Do you like waiting for things, or do you like things to happen like when they're supposed to? If you don't like just waiting for things indefinitely, you can definitely decrease your weight by fasting. There are accounts in spiritual texts, which I'm not going to reference directly. I'm going to leave this up to your own interpretation so that whatever you follow spiritually, you can relate it to. But there are accounts of people who go into the wild, basically, into nature, choose to fast. Sometimes they're talked about as foraging and eating foods that only the animals would eat. Sometimes they don't eat. Sometimes they don't eat or drink water. There are variances in terms of how tough someone is mentally to withstand what they're enduring. Because I am enduring discomfort by not eating. And again, I'm doing that because I'm trying to tell a message. I don't have the energy to focus on a lot of things, so I try to combine topics. I am talking about nature and how nature is nurture and how health is wealth and how the foods that we eat or don't eat and how the shows that we consume or don't consume can contribute to our health. So I'm bringing all of this into the limelight, using my meager channel to tell you, if you're trying to restore your health, the first step, stop eating the things that are taking away from your health. You know what they are. We're all capable of hearing and learning that certain animal-based cholesterols result in some of us taking statins, medications that typically cause a more negative effect than the numbers needed to treat positively. You can ask your doctor about numbers needed to treat, NNT, for statins. I believe it's 4%. 4 is the value. Might be 14. It has a 4 in it. Either way, the odds are not in your favor. And at a certain extreme dosage where it does help you, it might be conversely affecting you in negative ways that you're not considering. You're not considering because you're panicked about this. You're panicked about I can't stop taking this. This is what I was prescribed. This is the thing that made that number go down. Well, what about the other thing you can do? What about eating differently? Is that possible at all for any period of time? How about not eating at all for any period of time? So again, I'm calling to attention the things that we are fully capable of accomplishing without going into shock, without dying, without being unable to walk, without losing our own health, without losing our minds. We can do these things and bring clarity. And again, we don't even have to do it to this extreme. You can hear the knowledge, you can consume it however you want, and you can also give a little bit of regard to how eating differently could cause different results. Your results may vary. All of your results may vary. I'm not a doctor. I didn't stay at that Super 9 Express hotel that made me smarter because I had their continental catch breakfast with all the different things that are also not contributing to the wealth of our nation. I didn't have any of that to come to this awakening. I didn't have to have any of that or do without any of the things I've done without to come to this type of awakening. Once you become aware, though, it sure can be challenging to have a conversation with one another because some of us are only caught up in the current events, which aren't even current. There's some people still arguing about COVID shots, masks. And I just told you at the beginning of my parking situation here, there's a mask right under the back tires of this car. There are masks throughout this entire park that are brought to you courtesy of not me. But to call it rightfully, it's all brought to us courtesy of Mother Nature. Mother Nature allows us all these products that we've designed for the assistance of one another. How are we assisting one another? How are those things really assisting us in the long run? Is it okay to continue to wear a mask and pretend that we're having conversations when someone's yelling and their eyes are red and they're ready to punch you? Is it okay when the person starts hitting you? Is it okay when the person is about to try to hit someone smaller than them because they're a bully? When is it okay to allow bullying in our own presence? When is it okay to continue to celebrate while robbing from your own family? Tell me when it's okay in the comments area. I hope all of you watching this say never. This is never okay. That's all we need. We just need a little bit of class participation, class action. Spelling is such an interesting thing. I definitely have lost weight by fasting. In that spiritual text, to get back to the subject that I had touched on, when I read about fasting, I read about a coinciding amount of days sometimes that occurred before they heard the message of whatever being from whatever book that acknowledges a higher power might speak of. So there's a little bit of action. There's a lot of people taking action. Some actions might put the answers a little bit sooner for the people who are checking into that express lane. Some people will call it manifesting, and they'll just all day long share those secrets, never say anything about using the discernment to figure out whether we're manifesting something good to begin with or not. What we consume regularly is what we want to manifest, and what we take from comes from Mother Nature. And whether we give Mother Nature a due share of credit sometimes is revealed in our own heart and how we think about one another. So as I ask you, on day 2 of this extended water fast, where were you when you saw this? What were you thinking of before you saw this post? And did this help you change any of your mindset at all? Is this conversation relevant to a water fast? Do some people do this without wanting to experience something spiritually? I would not hesitate to say yes. A lot of people will do this just to lose weight. Whatever we think about manifests regularly and repeatedly. And so it's my duty to protect the way that I'm being treated. Because all of this impacts my own residence. What I am steward of. What I'm steward of, I'm going to improve and return in restored condition in each instance that I'm returning something. And I'll do it to the best of my ability. I'm not a professional woodsmith. I'm not a professional, let's put it that way. But if you were to be the thing that I'm entrusted to, and by that what I mean is if I'm entrusted to driving you around, I'm going to put all of my effort into safeguarding you. My focus is going to be 100% designed around making sure you're not taking the impact in the event of a collision. And by that, what I mean is there's some situations you really cannot, there are a lot of situations we cannot control. I can set out in one direction on one day, and any other thing that sets out in a different direction or even remains steadfast can be something that become a collision for me if I'm not paying attention, or if the other person's not paying attention, or if a whole other entity is not paying attention and causes 2 or 3 misdirections. It's important to pay attention with one another. It's important when someone asks to respect a certain thing or to abide by a certain guideline. And it's really important to not overlook when someone's over communicating with you and asking, hey, can you pay attention? It's really important to understand at that point what we have here is a failure to communicate. I'm enjoying my water fast for clarity. I'm knocking out several topics at the same time, and I've done so in a way where I've definitely held you as a captive audience for over 40 minutes. If you've listened and you've listened to this whole thing, this was intended for you. And if it was intended for you, you've got to understand, yes, there was a personal delivery of some insight there for someone specific perhaps, but the overall reality is our ability to concentrate and focus and communicate are all tied hand in hand. They're all tied hand in hand. In order to communicate, we have to be able to listen. So if nothing else, what you're doing here is improving your listening skills. And again, you can find out how I learned to do that along the way. My website is us385.com, which is the highway to Big Bend National Park. Love doing this on camera. I really should be thinking in this frame and not seeing what I'm seeing on the screen. US 385, the highway to Big Bend. I noticed a lot of anomalies in nature, and these anomalies are starting to present themselves more and more frequently to the point where it becomes predictable what I'm going to see, when I'm going to see it, why I'm going to see it. Most often, hunger is the primary driving force between all of the wildlife that I'm encountering. And in many cases, that's the same with us. We're just waiting for that next hit, whether it's sugary or not. But we're looking to be entertained. Entertainment in itself, the value of it, you got to think, if it's free or discounted, what is it doing for me, for my ability to concentrate? Is it a commercial break that I need to experience in order to be shaken just a little bit to go, oh, wow, that was just a show. Here I am in real life talking about real things. December 21st, day after a birthday. They didn't eat for their birthday. Why didn't they eat for their birthday? They also didn't do this for Thanksgiving. They didn't eat during Thanksgiving week. Why didn't they do it? It was in a book, they said, in a book about some spiritual thing. Spiritual, oh, it's another word that causes discomfort for some. I'm talking about these things because there are people who will understand what I'm saying. And I also understand that I'm not sharing anything that's dangerous because there are people who are too weak to follow through with anything that takes a change of attitude. If gratitude's your attitude, then everything's a-okay. And that shows through in the way that we talk with one another. If we're ungrateful, then we will diminish even the very children of others who we dislike for whatever reason. And by that, I mean, if we don't like a snake, we're going to dislike all snakes, even all their children's snakes, even the baby snakes. Might like a baby bear, but if I really hate big bears, I'm really going to hate the baby bears too. It's a hierarchy. And the only reason we give different qualifications from one to the other is because of threat. Even that, fangs, threat, implied threat. Here in Texas, I don't know how many snakes we have, but I think we have 4 venomous snakes. There's the copperhead, the water moccasin, which also called the cottonmouth, I'll tell you in a second. The coral snake and the rattlesnake. Off the bat, those are the ones I can remember right now. I'm not saying there's not a 5th one. I know there's at least 3 flavors of rattlesnake in Texas. And what I just saw that wasn't here earlier is a Trans Am. It looks like it could be a 2002. It's a beautiful blue color. I had a Trans Am like that once. I had 2. I had a sunset orange one. And that was my dream car. I should have never let it go. And at the same time, anyone who's been to Big Bend or any of these places might understand the Trans Am can't go on all unpaved roads. In fact, most unpaved roads might cause it some serious difficulties. So I'm glad that you're paying attention here, that you understand that I like this vehicle that I'm in. I wrote a song called I've Still Got My Jeep. And if you stay tuned, as I showcase all of these guitars that I have, you're going to see something absolutely special that was designed just for me and that I'm absolutely grateful to share with you. It's going to be coming to me. Probably it'll arrive by the beginning of this upcoming year at the latest. And I'm looking forward to it. I've had many things in my life that I've personalized a little bit after the fact, but I've never had an item that was personalized just for me like this. And so I'm absolutely excited to showcase it to you. I'm excited to bring you these stories. I'm excited to help you through another hour with power, where you're understanding that those cravings that you have, you might need to sit down with those cravings for a little while. And instead of fearing them, you might want to get a little comfortable with those cravings. You might want to get a little bit familiar with those pains and understand that some of the guilt and some of the anxiety has to do with the fact that we know other people are suffering from hunger right now. And we're still bickering over blankets that have teams emblazoned upon them. We're still shedding blood over property without ever thinking about the blood as being something that was important too. And I don't mean blood like a relationship. I mean, this is life. What you're here for right now is to be alive with one another. If you weren't meant to be here alive with one another, you wouldn't be here already. You know, we're here to see a story. We're here to participate. We're here to use our voice. And so that's what I'm doing. I'm using my voice. However, some people are not understanding some of the things I'm saying. Even though our base language is the same language. That's how I know things are off. Because when I can communicate with people who speak an entirely different language, when I can go out of my way to make that happen, and they can too, that's how I know. The universal language is love, and without words, we will find a way to communicate. I know it because my grandmother only spoke with me in Spanish, and I only spoke with her in English, and we found a way to communicate. Some people spoke 2 languages, including this very language that I'm communicating in and would rather resort to punching me. And making fun of however I attempted to speak the language that I didn't know as my primary language. Once I let go of the fact that there are some people who will belittle you and yell at you and try to blame you for their own discomfort, then I learned, hey, I think I've done that before. I had to accept that I've been a bully in order to recognize a bully when it's happening and to address it. I've also been patient and very kind about sharing these insights. I've been very open to saying, I am not the definitive tell-all of whether or not purgatory exists. This could very well be it. And I don't care. That's not the focus. The focus in all of the scriptures of peace that I've ever looked at so far has never been to criticize someone who is still open to learning. Some of us are not open to learning, and that, again, usually is a telltale trait of panic. If we have panic on Floor Street, what's going to happen? The stockings are going to drop. I mean, the stockings that are hanging from the chimney, they weren't hung with care. They weren't even hung. They were just errantly flailed up there, thrown in like foil into a microwave because we weren't paying attention. Some of us are paying attention, but we're following a voice without thinking about it. We're burning the house down. Some of us are not helping to dispatch additional help when help is needed. Some of us are shorting the other person's ability to experience peace by our very act of not participating. And in those instances, again, in my household, it's imperative that I protect my own health. And in order to do that, I've returned the favor by saying, if you're going to treat me like this, I'm going to give you a warning. This is my 2-day warning. Imagine what's going to happen by day 3 or whatever it happens to be. One time I worked at a place where somebody sent an email to the team. And the email, the subject said 2-second notice. And there were these paragraphs and paragraphs of why this person was calling it quits. It's like literally, I saw the email come. I saw the person who had sent the email. They stood up and they were walking to the elevator. And in about 2 seconds, they had crossed the room and hit the button. And before my existing conversation was over, that person was gone. They literally gave us a 2-second notice instead of a 2 weeks notice, which is typical in the workforce, or it was when I was coming up. In my time, we used to give 2-week notices before we quit. I'm trying to talk from a different era. It didn't come out right. I apologize. In my time, that was a common thing. We used to have courtesy. In my time, I remember being a Boy Scout. The things we were supposed to be a scout is trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, brave, clean, and reverent. What are we now? Did we take an oath for a portion of time? In a lot of cases we have. There are a lot of contracts that we've backed out on deferred, denied. It's the world we live in. There are a lot of guidelines that are legal, like, for an example, the sale of medication that has a NNT that's almost laughable. We abide by things that are legal, but we never ever give credit to whether we should be doing it a certain way or not. Now, don't get me wrong. In those same books of texts, in those same spiritual books that I talked about, that also have a lot of insight about these extended fasts, by the way. In those same books, there's plenty of insight into fasting and the things that can be achieved. The power of manifesting, the law of attraction. The Creator will give us this day our daily energy. It almost doesn't matter how we say it if we say it with gratitude. And at the same time, you've got to believe. Even the books about overcoming substance abuse, for an example, which I have read, even the books that like to claim that people should be anonymous when they need help, almost like there should be a shame, they still reference a higher power. And the higher power is referenced because we do need to understand that even if there are just a few people in the car and someone is yelling out of their mind, it doesn't matter if this person saw, that person saw, that person saw, this person saw. Sometimes we all need to have a reminder that there's a higher power that is observing. And that's why we can see the aging process. It's like I can absorb a lot, boom, and return it. But let's try to make peace. That way you accept that energy the right way. Because a lot of what I've returned recently in the form of letters and what's going out basically in tomorrow's mail, I don't know that it ever should have gotten to that point. The only reason it got to that point is because somebody is not listening or maliciously taking advantage of a situation that they have no right to be meddling in unless they themselves are an outright bully who really shouldn't be benefiting from the system anymore as they continue to belittle the system that they should be grateful to participate with. Society can really stand to look really deeply at who it is that's employed and continued to be provided for in the system that we have. And also, some of us can take a break from participating in the system because we've taken too much. I know that I've taken too much without ever recognizing that I was manifesting without ever thinking about the other person until I slowed down and thought about it. So why am I fasting? I'm fasting, again, in recognition that a lot of people have had it much tougher than we have. It gives me energy. It gives me clarity. I can tell you that if you do it regularly, it changes how you feel. And I can tell you that you've also been doing an excellent job for hanging in for an hour. You've listened for an hour. If you have not used any substances or ingested any ill content for this whole time, multitasked your way out of this, congratulations. Give a like to this video. Be sure to subscribe and to share. And until next time, Thank you so much for journeying with me on the Jeep Journals. Till next time, peace, love, and all that old school stuff.